Welcome again to another evening of whatever the hell this is. Where I'd like to remind you that our motto is, we ain't got no motto. Which makes it easier to deal with, because if you got a motto, everybody got a motto, General Motors and DuPont and everybody, better things for better living. So you think, well, hell, I know what they're about, besides trying to make a profit. At least you know what they want you to think they're about. But it's better to have no motto. Well, it's better to say that our motto is, we ain't got no motto, and then let people worry about it. And figure, why would anybody go to trouble if they're not going to have a motto to say that that is their motto? That's for me to know and you to figure out. I'm going into something else that I hit many times, but I'm hitting it tonight for another reason. I'm still not talking about the thing per se, but the grand and glorious idea that is now an accepted reality of man's unconscious mind. But I want you to look at it in a specific, slightly different way tonight, if you will try. I recently heard someone, here it comes, get ready for our Baptist story. I heard someone, I think it was on a TV lecture show, one of these 30-minute commercials, but at any rate, it was selling like subliminal tapes or some kind of course in something to to change your unconscious mind. We all right? The line, the jump-off point for tonight, for the first paragraph, is this. The fellow was saying, or the voiceover, and them flashing whatever it was for sale. But now listen to this. Because this wraps up about 5,000 years of human history in a certain way, brings it right to date. And what it was they were selling, but it amounted to this. The line, his punch line and our opening line for tonight was this. Were it not for man's unconscious, no one would be fat or overweight, broke, or a failure. For why would anyone consciously choose to be so? End of quote. That literally, in a certain line, in Life's Body, wraps up, takes all kinds of mythological tales, all sorts of religious ideas about demons and etc., and brings it right up to date. It's just so succinct, all-inclusive, that were it not for your unconscious mind, for man's unconscious mind, no one would be a failure, no one would be sad, no one would be overweight, no one would be less than successful financially and otherwise, because consciously, with your conscious mind, who in the world would consciously choose to be a failure, overweight, broke, sad? Life just about got you there. Because some of you, I guess a good thing you didn't see that show. You might have seen your $249 for the tape. But forget about the guy. Life has almost got you. Now, the easier part that surely I can point out that you can start with is this. Is what this does, and its many various forms for the last 5,000 years, but what it does right now, bring it right up to date, what it does is, it offers you, apparently, a way out of what could otherwise be perceived to be some sort of biological, deterministic certainty. But as long as you have got this unconscious mind, and as long as you have got the idea the way that he expressed it, to point out, it's not in question whether you have an unconscious mind, really. You can take that round-up sentence as life having this guy attempt to take up for any smart aleck still around saying, well, there's no such thing as an unconscious mind, or it's a whole bunch of hogwash and it doesn't amount to anything. That the sentence takes up for any criticism. It takes up for a crude apologist who might still feel that they must be around to uphold the banner of man's psyche being split up into a conscious and an unconscious part. It takes care of all of it. Because it simply asks you the inescapable question, while tacitly making you admit, all right, man's got to have an unconscious mind. Now that you put it this way, because if all we're dealing with is my conscious mind, and here I am not as successful as I wanted to be. I'm sad a lot of the times. I don't have a good social and love life. I continue to put on weight. I can't stop my bad habits, and I didn't decide to do them. You got me. Were it not for the unconscious mind, no one would be blank. Just fill it in. Because of the fact of who would consciously choose to be blank. And the answer is, of course, well, nobody. Please send in your $249. That, of course, is not necessary, but what life has been running. The meter never stops, even if the cab sits there. It never stops because you feel as though there is an open-end possibility of change. But it is so beautiful, so well put together, that even I, at times, I was going to be melodramatic and say, are staggered by some of what life's done. I'm not really, but sometimes I'm almost staggered. I want to rhapsodize even more so on it. That it doesn't say that you can change. It doesn't say that you must change. It's almost that you've been hit. I guess it might feel like at first a steel glove, but inside you got the nice soft hands of a masseuse. Just kind of stroking you once you're hit. Through that steel glove, you catch it, and then it's like, aw, simultaneously. Because it doesn't say that people will not be broke, overweight, sad. It doesn't say that life is going to change that. Inside the sentence is already given that as a given. All right, some people are that way. And that the back cover is one of those that's going to hit almost anybody listening. Oh, yeah. You're somewhat of a failure. You're probably a little overweight. You probably don't have the greatest life in the world, social life. Yeah. I bet at times you're sad. Yeah. It doesn't say that's going to change. It doesn't say that you should change. It doesn't say that you can change, but it points this out. That there is a reason, and the reason's not really you. Because also implicit in the sentence is that the conscious mind is you and I. The guy singing. It has to be. Assuming that you and I, the man speaking for life in this case, what he is also saying is, all right, you and I, the things we do that we don't like is not us, assuming we're sane. I know I'm sane. I'm here saying the tape, so I know I'm sane. And we'll assume that you're sane. It's saying that what's happening is not your fault. It's not even your immediate responsibility. But it's pointing out that people are suffering from these conditions of being overweight, being unhappy, being broke. But it is not really their fault. But it's also not saying, notice, it's not saying, all right, let's go back to the days of John Calvin or whoever it was, that everything is predetermined. That the gods just sit around and they decide, all right, make all the people that's being born right now that's over in that quadrant of the planet, make them all where they grow up they'll get to be overweight. And all the ones over here, make sure that they end up living in mobile homes. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say that things are as they are and that it is biologically determined that your behavior is inalterable. It doesn't say that. And it's not saying that your family ruined you. It's not saying that God's got it in for you. It's saying people are overweight, people are less than financially successful, people are less than continually happy. Yeah. And were it not for their unconscious mind, they wouldn't be that way. Well, I don't know. I never believed much in that psychology crap. Because, continuing the sentence, because who would behave, who would be like this via a conscious decision? And then everybody who's sane has to go, huh. Life has slapped you around, kicked you in your private parts, took you up and shook you by your heels, threw you over its shoulder, spun you around to where you got dizzy, and then went, and put you back in line, waiting to be slaughtered, and made you go, I feel a lot better now. It sustains in a most clever way that I believe enough of you see it without me belaboring this one point. It sustains beautifully the appearance of people actually having a way out of what could otherwise be thought of as biologically determinism. It gives the open end. There it is. You don't have to do it now. We're not saying you must do it, but it's always there. There is the way things are, and there is the appearance of a continual, if not immediate way out, a way to deal with it. Because any complaint you have about yourself, you obviously, consciously didn't choose it. You or anybody. And everybody on this planet. Your choices are rather limited intellectually. Rather limited. I can't help what I do. And then you can make variations under that. You know, God made me do what I do. The gods have predetermined everything. Or you can take variations of that under that. My past background, the way my family treated me, made me do it. Or the kind that nobody likes. Nobody is that my genes are making me and everybody else do it, and there ain't no way out. And then, of course, part of that beauty is, well, wait a minute, there's got to be a way out, or I could not. There's a variation of my other story. I could not be thinking that there's no way out. Do you remember them letting a guy get up and speak at that neurological convention? It's just a variation. So if you tell people, if you tried to tell somebody that, all right, genes absolutely determine everything. Everything. There is no kind of non-material or non-physical, in the most simplistic way, there is no psychology or intellectual activity beyond that. Then people will go, well, wait a minute, just because you say that is proof, almost, yeah, it is. It's almost real proof that there's got to be at least one way out, or we couldn't even think that. One way or the other. I couldn't think that, hey, I can't help what I'm doing right now, including saying I can't help what I'm doing. We couldn't do that unless there was some possibility we'd help what we're doing. The way this sentence puts it together, though, just goes back to all the little three-dimensional contemporary nooks and crannies and loose ends, and just sort of wraps them all together. As I said, hits you good and then goes, oh. Because it apparently gives the non-ending possibility. Whether you want to take it or not, there's no encouragement even inherent in the sentence that you should. It just states that were it not for the unconscious mind, no one would be overweight, lonely, or broke, comma, for who would consciously choose to be so? It is a thing of beauty. That's why I keep repeating it. As much as I love Mozart or Bach or some of the old Howling Wolf, that is just beauty. I just don't know how to improve upon it, except the way I did, because, of course, I didn't quote somebody. I straightened it out. But they about had it covered. Now, beyond that immediate aspect, let me point out something else. A benefit with this sort of thinking. And people, especially in our part of the world, do think along such lines now without ever hearing that one exemplary, boffo, knockout sentence. The thinking is already there, inherent in the wiring system of most of you people and your contemporaries. So keeping that in mind, now let me point out another aspect. The use of this is the dialogue can discuss to and between itself the state of this apparent malleable possibilities, so that each person to themselves can continually say variations of, yeah, whatever the problem is, we'll finally get to the bottom of this. The bottom being somewhere other than what is my conscious mind, that is me. Me as I know me and love me. That everyone can think to themselves continually in that dialogue of, yeah, you know, whatever it is. That one aspect of dialogue says, well, here you are putting on weight again. Yeah, but we'll get to the bottom of this. See, it doesn't, you don't have to say, yeah, you're right. Put down that cream puff. You know, bad hand. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say, you're right, I'll start a new diet next week. It doesn't say any of that. But what it can say is words to the effect of, yeah, and what the yeah now is, hey, you're right, it's not our fault. We're the conscious mind, you and me. And we'll get to the bottom of this sooner or later. That is, the implicit part here is, if we get to the bottom of this correctly, all this will go away. We can eat donuts all day and we won't put on weight. We'll get to the bottom of this. That is, once there is a satisfactory discovery, that is, that we can lay the blame where it belongs, which obviously it don't belong on you and me. But once we can find the spot, from now on out, it's going to be some sort of living paradise. Or, as they like to say in the used car business, smooth sailing. Because you have this open-ended opportunity waiting. That whatever is causing me to operate in ways that I find to be, if not physically detrimental, I find them to be unenjoyable. Then, even if I was no great believer in psychology, then I would have to be faced with those kinds of ideas such as self-defeating behavior. And then I would say, well, my God, I don't like the idea of psychology and all that crap, but that's true. Why do I keep eating and get fatter and fatter? Why do I keep going into business ventures or putting my money in some new activity 2 or 3 times a year, every year, and each and every time I get took? They take me like a dirty suit walking up to a drive-in window to cleaners. They just see me coming. Why? Why do I keep doing things that harm me? In the dialogue, based upon the general thinking now of man obviously having an unconscious. If the circumstances are right, if I want to apply myself, blah, 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 blah. We could get to the bottom of this. And implicit in that if I did get down and deal with my unconscious mind, that's driving all of this unproductive behavior, because who would operate in ways less than proper to themselves consciously? No one. So, if I could ever get around to the bottom of this, the very act of getting to the bottom of it would cure the problem. That'd be it. And staying with verbal descriptions, of course, right now, I can point out that with most ordinary thinking, that about, at any given time, puts the lid on it because you won't do anything. You don't need to do anything right now. You can try to do something, but you can't really change much, and so you can drop it right quick. But you can continue to think, well, I'm too busy right now. But you continue to think that I can get to the bottom of this. Next paragraph. I've been needing a way to drag this. Well, I've been looking for a way to drag it to you. I was going to give you a new weapon. For those of you who are more pacifistically inclined, a new tool. Since I know some of you are trying not to bring yourselves up to be so enamored of still playing with G.I. Joe and your little cap pistols. A new tool. And here we go again. I'm going to have to give it to you. I'm going to give it to you as a do not. So twist it around, make it a do if you want to. But here is really a very immediately useful and forever too. Is don't ever again, don't ever say, and don't even ever think, I feel. Don't even think it. But don't ever say, just stop it. Don't say, I feel. And insofar as thinking, I could say, don't ever even think, I feel, except in specific physical matters. But you ought to be that sane that you might want to say to yourself, you might want to go ahead and think, I feel a tremendous pain in my foot. But we're talking about physical sensation now. We're not talking about anything beyond the realm of physical sensation. Pain. Other than that, you should never say, I feel. You should stop it right now. Just do not do it. Don't say, I feel about anything. If you're going to say it, or you catch yourself, you've already started a sentence, stop right there in the middle and just change it to, I think. And don't listen to any dialogue to start with or go, wait a minute, this is not going to sound right. That's not what I meant. You don't know what you meant. And if you can listen up here for a few minutes, I may be able to disavow you of worrying about that even as we talk. You can change it mid-sentence. And as I said, some of you in the next few minutes may say that you didn't actually mean it and you've never meant it. That all I'm doing is teaching you to speak correctly. Let me start off and ask you a question. How much, you and everyone, will give me a chance to have another sip of coffee. Let me ask you this. How much do you suppose that men actually feel compared to how much they say they feel? Everybody think about it a second. Now, you heard it very simply. How much do you suppose that you and everybody else, how much do you actually feel compared to the times that you say, well, I feel so and so. Well, I'll tell you how I feel about that. Well, I don't feel that's correct. I don't feel. What do you think the ratio is? Would anybody buy a zillion to one? A billion to one? All right. This may strike some of you because I've talked about such matters before in the same area. Don't too many of you believe that you'll immediately know what I'm going to say, or you're going to miss something. But let me point out, the more intellectually centered you are, which all of you fit that definition. If you were born in the Western Hemisphere in this century, in the last 50 years, and you do not suffer some serious brain damage that I can tell, And I could tell. Then you fit the general definition, I mean, of being intellectually centered. Intellectually sophisticated. The more you are such, the less you actually feel. And the older actual area that drove men originally to come up with the idea of feel, of human feelings. Does that get too convoluted? The more I could take anybody off the street in New York or Miami, Los Angeles, Paris, Rome, that say, just in the normal course of their conversation throughout the day about, I feel this, I feel that. Then I could grab me somebody from, I guess I'll stick with New Guinea. That seems to be the last holdout, or one of the great bastions of those who I think after the National Geographic and people leave doing their films, I think they all go back in the bushes and smoke whatever they got and go to civilization. In fact, it wasn't but a decade or so ago that some of them were still thinking that some of the reporters and camera people that disappear for lengths of time are not often drunks, that some of those New Guinea people posed for pictures and talked to them and showed them weird things and then killed them and ate them. But at any rate, I'm using them archetypically because we've hardly got any uncivilized people just really worthy to note much anymore. It's all a matter of degree. But at any rate, if we took somebody who seemed to still be living almost a feral life, living out on the run, peripatetic, still having those kinds of old... I know they might get that. That's when you feel bad that you don't stop in one place. For those of you who like that, then go back and figure out what a hypocontractor is. People who still are living, relatively speaking, that which would be closer to the uncivilized life. All right, assuming in their language that they say, I feel, I feel, I feel. What they're referring to is almost beyond your experience. Almost. Not totally, by any means. But the intensity, the reality of the older passions that would make someone from another time or a different area of life's body right now, less civilized, it would make them say, I feel. When they said I feel, you better watch it. When you say I feel, that's why I started this part of the paragraph, how many times a day do you say I feel? How many times an hour do you say I feel if you're talking a lot? And then, how much of it do you actually feel? Now don't just say, well, it's a figure of speech, and I probably, come to think about it, use it interchangeably, think and feel, and that's very likely. But what I want you to see is that somewhere along the line of growth and expansion, life took people, your forefathers, when they were less intellectually based, but as part of, I would suggest to you, a part of the organic growth of the human nervous system, that they began to talk about I feel, and if I had to put a psychological description, which I will right quick, and it's meaningless, except it does point to reality, is as people began to be able to talk about the way they feel, they could, in many ways, cease to act necessarily on the immediate feelings, which is normally good for life, assuming it's not trying to wipe out this whole group of people. That if they began to slowly, gradually get to the point that some of them, one guy can turn to another and say, I feel like you cheated me, and I feel like that I might want to kill you for it. Rather than immediately killing the guy, another guy goes, I feel as though perhaps, and let's say the first guy that spoke is a lot bigger and has more weapons at his disposal. And the second guy says, well, I feel as though you may have a point there. I feel as though perhaps I did unknowingly, unconsciously, take advantage of our last transaction, and here, let me repay you. do you see? By being able to, as it were, to talk about feelings, passions, and to call them something, then it can be a matter of, in graduations, of replacing action for talking of action. I feel as though you mistreated me, and I feel as though I probably will have to kill you, or I feel as though the rest of the tribe will think less of me. And the guy says, I feel as though you have a point, and I feel as though I did wrong. I feel bad about it. I didn't mean to. The frog gods made me do it, either that or my unconscious mind. And I feel as though I owe you an apology publicly, and I feel as though I should give you back 14 extra goats and my 2 oldest daughters. Okay, my 2 youngest daughters. The question of the subparagraph I started was, then, how much do you suppose that you and everyone else in the civilized parts of the world, which is almost the whole world now, actually feel compared to how often they say, use the term feel? Now, it's talking about physical sensation now. But those things which are deemed to be singularly human emotion, how much of it? Now, let me push it a little further for you. The more intellectually transmittable you are, the more you're in the mainstream of contemporary life. The less life seemingly even makes you passionate. Think about that a second. That does not withstand the fact that I know that all large percentages of people sitting here hearing me in person, and you people on tape out there, I know the kinds of people. Notwithstanding that many of you believe that you're a great problem when you get involved with this, or your dialogue would still tell you that it has to do with your emotions, that you're emotionally crippled, or you're too shy, you're too angry, and that if you could get one wish granted from my magical suitcase, it would be straighten my feelings out. I can take care of my intellect, and I can take care of my body, I can make myself run, I can lose weight, but boy, it's my feelings. Do something with them. Now, I have talked about that in other ways before, but let me repeat what I just said. The truth is, life has rendered most people, the more intellectual, the more you are in our day and time, the less you are actually passionate. Notwithstanding that many of you would swear that you're far too passionate. Think about it a second. I know that you'll say, well, my emotions drive me nuts. I sit around and worry about what? I sit around and I feel bad. And I feel negative daydreams, and I'm always feeling like something bad's going to happen. I feel like people do not like me sufficiently. I know. But now let me ask you, how passionate is all that? If I ask you, everybody come in and tell me, you come in and you do it, and you almost sound like Clint Eastwood, overacting. Once you have become part of life's intellectual network, even those that would write poetry or write plays or be... When people say, you know, I don't like life. I wish I'd been born 200 years ago so I could have written that kind of sad poetry. Maybe I could have made a living. But, you know, life, a lot of times I just feel like life is just a pisser. Sometimes I want to commit suicide. Did you hear the way I was doing that? That's about the kind of passion that you would get from somebody. Well, I suggest if you were on one of those outfits that take in the crisis calls, and somebody calls in and says, I've about had it and I'm going to commit suicide, want to call and tell somebody, I suggest to you it would sound like somebody that couldn't get a job at the local community theater. And if you said, really, is life that bad? And they would go, yeah, it's terrible. Well, I mean, is it something me that's happened to you, or is it continuing problems? I don't know, it's both. It's just, life is just... Now, you normally don't think about this, but enough of you are laughing now that you can feel a kind of reality. How passionate are people? in our day and time? It's not right or wrong, but how actually passionate are they in the sense of where passion originated? And human feelings are simply a variation of the most basic, physical, self-defensive, life-preserving passions. There is a direct connection, whether people ordinarily take it into account or not, but all of you should be able to hear me. There's a direct connection between sex, sleep, food, and art, music, philosophy. There is. Anything that would seem to be of the highest that the city could judge some human feeling to be. Self-denial, charity. It is all directly connected to human physical passion. I'm drawing a verbal distinction between the two. There is less apparent, there is seemingly less and less need for people to be passionate. Am I right or am I wrong? I'm just as right as I always am. Thank you. Almost no need for real passion. I know that many of you feel like you're missing something, or you don't think I've hit the bullseye yet. How do most people spend the free time they have? Other than some physical activity, which I know many people in our day and time do that. Just ordinary people go out and jog when they get home, etc. Other than that, which let's just look at that for the time being as being as much as possible a non-emotional, non-intellectual activity, the behavior itself of exercise. So now back to my question. After you've done your job, and let's say that you went out and ran 40 minutes, you're going to eat right quick, and then the rest of the day, the evening, the afternoon, the night is yours. What do people do? Would you say that I am being specious for me to point out to you that people then devote themselves to being entertained? Do they not? To go to a sporting event, to go to the theater, to go to a movie, and what is it they're paying to see? Don't tell me people, men in little short pants jumping up throwing balls into hoops, people playing music. No. You know what they're paying for? To see somebody else apparently with more passion than they have at that moment. Too many of you believe that you're missing it, and you're not missing it. It's right up in front of your eyeballs. Would you go, if you like sports, do I have to tear up every example? Sports. Would you go see a sporting team, a sporting event, if the people involved, 2 boxers, 2 NBA teams, but if the teams played with no passion, the participants in the sporting event played with no passion. Contrary, as long as I'm here, I might point this out. Some of you will be able to hear this. You do know that the last time I've read, and it's been going on now for at least a decade, it's been reborn again, is professional wrestling on television. That every time it is shown in almost every market, they can stick it in prime time, and it just destroys competition. Forget Masterpiece Theater. You know. Alistair Cook's going to have to put on tights. Well, the reason I brought it out here, of course, it brought to mind me talking about sports. You can look at, of course, professional wrestling as being almost sports turned inside out, insofar as actually being an athletic contest. So it's not really that, other than the fact of the talent it takes to throw each other around and not kill yourself. What is it? It's all the damn talk and the theatrics, the passion. just as phony as you could say that it is. It's bad acting, most of it. Of course, I could say from another viewpoint, for the kind of people they got involved with, and the acting ain't all that bad. It's surprisingly good for the kind of people they got. And so you can take what apparently the people going out, instead of, hey, let's go to an athletic event, let's go see the Hawks play the Celtics tonight. Oh, let's go to, they got some professional wrestling down here. Then, the certain kind of people that are really jocks, the kind of guys that love athletics and watch it on TV and etc., by and large, they would say, if you question them, well, professional wrestling is not the same thing as seeing a good boxing match, or even good collegiate athletic wrestling. But why is it popular? So you can say, well, it's not actually a sporting event. Okay, I'll give you that, it's not. So why is it so popular? Passion. Passion, passion. Well, I should not have to stay on this too long for other examples, but people pay to be exposed to, I was trying to give you a wide range here for you to deal with it, but they will pay all the way from theatrical productions to music, whether it be the opera, whether it be symphonies, whether it be, I guess they still call it rock. You're not going out, whether you like music, whether you like the theater, no matter whether it's supposed to be a comedy, it's supposed to be a drama, a musical, whether you're going to the symphony, whether you're going out to see competition, Olympic pre-trials in ice skating, in anything. Whether people are talking, whether it was a mime, you're still paying to apparently have somebody in the dominant position, that is on stage with a spotlight on them, who are, for that given length of time, you paid for their time. The show's going on for roughly 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it is, that they are going to be more passionate, apparently, which is all you're paying for, to apparently be more passionate than you are. That's what you're paying somebody for. Religions? How can you explain, as much as ordinary intellects like to attack them? I guess those poor old down-home preachers on television now probably attack more than those good old down-home wrestlers. The same thing. Except the preachers have to put on a suit and tie. Plus they have to go on longer. But at any rate, it's the same thing. You're paying for the passion. Also mentioning music, some of you might be aware of this, another little twist. Country music, sales-wise, had been a steady commodity for years and years, and there was a little spate there. If you're not aware, I can tell you right quick. I guess it was historical, now they'd call it the 70s, that Nashville and the whole country music scenario fell into being, as they called it for a while then, and now ex post facto, it got too sophisticated, too cityfied. Well, you know damn well it did when 10 years worth of George Jones albums, of course one of our favorite singers in the world, is almost drowned in a sea of violins and cellos in the Nashville Symphony. But in a sense, see, what was going on was a regular kind of outgrowth of ordinary human evolution, individually and otherwise, of going from the more crude passions being more intellectual, and so what seemed to be more exemplary of country music coming uptown and being sophisticated, they didn't drop immediately all the steel guitars, but they started bringing in, at first, just a small string section. Then the whole symphony. And then you had critics, and now of course it's gone through another little thing of a revivalist period, and now you have artists now that are back to the bare bones. This kind of thing goes on, as all of you got to be fairly aware that this kind of thing goes on in literature, painting. You know, they'll call it one thing, modernism, then it becomes postmodernism. In architecture, then it becomes neo-postmodernism. Then it becomes retro neo-postmodernism. But it was an absolute criticism. It was a rallying cry of denunciation. There was even a subculture in country music called the outlaws, those that fled from the Nashville scene and tried to go back for part of that decade. We got to go back to our roots. We got to go back where it had some, of course they normally won't call it in the music business, soul, whether it be black or white music or symphony. But they're talking about the same thing, that there's certain people or certain acts or certain way you put together a record or a performance And it's either got it or it don't. As one of our great Supreme Court justices said, I still like the example again, when referring to pornography, it's the same way with soul. They can't say what it is, but like the justice says, you know, I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. The kind of people who enjoy music, while I was staying with that example, they can say, well, I'm not sure what soul means, but you know there's a difference in picking up an album that says, the Carpenters sing the blues, between that and something like Muddy Waters Gets Down. If you got some taste for music, what you're talking about is, I'm going to call it, again, passion. But now I'm getting close to take you one of the places I'm trying to get you to tonight, and that has to do with, well, some of you should know. I'm calling it passion now until I got around to it, but it's really the P of P, the pretense of passion. That's all that you're paying for. That's all you're going out for. Now, of course, I'm going to have to tell you, at least any of you are this dumb still, that all the people in the arts and entertainment and everywhere are not in some kind of conspiracy. They do not think of it as a pretense of passion. They understand that some nights they have to try and get themselves up more than in other nights. Sometimes it's harder, sometimes it's easier, some nights they're just not with it. And they got all these kind of terms. You've heard them all. It's no big secret. Sometimes they want to blame the audience, in fact. But what you're dealing with, the more that you're in the mainstream of city life, which all of you are, we'll assume, that you came from a fairly bourgeoisie position in life and that you were fairly sane and stable before you got here with this. The more you're there, no matter how much you may talk about feel, the less you actually feel in the sense, in relation to those older, basic, necessary passions that were the rock foundation, that were and still are the rhetorical basis for the word feeling. That what you're saying about feeling now has less and less of any direct connection to actual passion. You just say it. Now it's got some, because everything's connected to everything else. But if people even saying politically, people on talk shows, debate shows, they'll say, well, I feel as though if our country goes any further to the right, that the whole, some guy in Italy, that the whole NATO alliance is going to fall apart. I feel this sincerely. Really? Let that same guy, they find out he's been diagnosed as having cancer. And you see him interviewed again 2 or 3 months later, and he's lost 200 pounds. And there he lays. And they say, what do you think your legacy will be? He goes, well, I feel as though I have even more work to do. I feel as though perhaps the gods are not ready to call me. The point is, if it gets down to something as basic, again, back to the point that I was exempting from what I was talking about, of physical health, that is physical sensation, then you'll get some passion. But for somebody to say, you backed that goddamn truck up on my foot and it's still on here, get it off. You'll get a man do a nice acting job. It may only go on for a couple of seconds there. I may leave, I'm not through with this one subject yet tonight, but I may leave, as far as some of you are concerned, the way this is playing down here in Atlanta in person, I may leave this a little more open-ended than I could to encourage you to pursue this in several directions. But I am talking and pointing at and intend you to try and pursue something quite specifically, and I have not said it. And what you've gotten out of it this far that you may think I've said was still not it. There's something else. As far as real passion, though, you should be able to see this. If you don't see it and feel it right now, work on it. Just the next few hours, the next few days, and it should hit you that what I have said covered quite nicely an area that you had never even heard mentioned, much less covered. And that was based or hidden behind my question of how much do you actually feel in comparison to how often you talk about how you feel. Now, that was 15 minutes ago, so I guess I'll go ahead and I've already insinuated. If you will simply look at it, if you can't hit it right now, it should take you a few hours or a few days to realize that your passion about life, I don't care what, art, politics, family, your passion is nothing like the talk of your passion. You and other of the hoi polloi of life's sane, middle-of-the-road body. And the more you are where you people are, the intellectual center of life, the less there is any apparent need for this kind of passion. Thus, in another sense, the more people will pay for it, the more it has a passing sensation of being important. It's just not analyzed in this manner. It's analyzed as, well, I'll go out to be entertained. I like somebody that has talent. You can have talent so much that it's, getting on your clothes and messing you up, if we could judge it that way. With no passion, what have you got? You've got things that even critics will say things like, last night we saw Vladimir Greenhair perform Chopin's variation number so-and-so, blah, blah, blah. The man has technique which I cannot begin to fault, but I and others around me, within the first 2 minutes, were almost asleep. I have never heard Chopin played with so little passion, so little understanding of the complexities of the blah, 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 blah. What they're saying is the man knows how in some way. Of course, this is not the way life ordinarily works, because that's not the way life works. That a guy has spent 20 years developing his technique, but when he plays, it sounds as though, although he's hitting the right notes, it sounds as though it's some brain-damaged 5-year-old playing chopsticks. You follow me? That's just not the way it normally works. But yet, to varying degrees, life will let people and make people make criticism of somebody else. So, yeah, he has the technique, or she does. She can obviously mix up colors on a palette. And since she is not an abstract expressionist or some variation, I can tell what he or she's trying to paint. But Jesus, this is cold. It's like looking at ice cubes stuck on a canvas. All of that is saying the same thing. They're trying to say, well, in some way this person seems to have some ability to behave like a painter, like a singer, like a preacher, like a lecturer. But God, something's missing. I want my money back. Save your money. Don't go see this. Don't go ever. What are they saying? They're saying what I'm telling you. You pay to be exposed to, apparently, compared to you, to experience more passion than you can seem to churn up yourself. That's what you're paying for. You can have somebody tell you, recommend movies, and say, well, you know what I like. And they say, yeah, you'll like this. You'll laugh a lot. Or, yeah, I know what you like. This is a real tearjerker. Oh, that's irrelevant. Now, it may seem to be pertinent to you personally that, well, I like sad stuff. I like happiness. Still, what you're going to pay for, what you're expecting is, you're going to be exposed to more passion than seems to be extant or available in your life. That's why people, are you ready? Maybe some of you, I can get you going. Why do people look at accidents? It's just because they're bloodthirsty? It gets close to real passion. To drive over and there's somebody and they're cut from here to here and they're about to cover them up and you get one glimpse and their brains are coming out, their eyes hanging out like this. Now, as horrible as that is, people will do that, and the more sophisticated, the more they are a pope, a rabbi with a PhD, the more and more they will be inclined, trust me, to go and go, and they may go and say it's the most horrible thing they've ever seen, and they may want to talk about it for weeks. Why? It's a variation. Some kid went to see Metallica or Rat or somebody and went, God, those guys are great. Well, why are they great? I don't know. Well, I tried to listen to some of those things. I can't know what they're singing. Now I picked up on one cover and it had the words on it. The words don't even make sense. How can you go hear that stuff? Oh, you don't understand. How can you look at soap operas and it's nothing but blah, blah, and all the... You don't understand. How in the world can you go out and watch people beat each other up and they call it boxing or a sport? How can you do that? How can you drive by? How will you go out of your way when you hear there's a wreck or a fire? I don't know. I've answered all of it. People will pay. You don't have to pay, of course, to see a wreck necessarily, but people go out of their way. They'll pay one way or the other to apparently be exposed to more passion than is available in their everyday life. Now, can you connect what I'm talking about in general, or pointing at, and what I have pointed out also in the last few weeks, that a real revolutionist, somebody who had some intelligence of a new order, I put it to you more or less like this, that the passions of a real revolutionist would be whatever he pretended his passions were. If some of you recall, I had Cairo even say that love is the pretense of love. And if you may note, in the goodness of my heart and the magnanimousness of my feeling and thought, I have not dwelled on that because I noticed a lot of you look like you suddenly that you were blanched potatoes. So I know nobody was sitting there prepared to want to hear that. You mean all good emotions? Are you trying to infer that love, friendship, and all that's just an act? So you see, I didn't stay on that. Because to begin with, ordinary people, it's not just an act, because ordinary people can act. So it's not an act. It would really be the pretense of passion. But can you see why I would go to the trouble to bring out several times of me saying that such things as love, which was a pretty hard example, I thought it would be for a lot of you, to say that love is the pretense of love. It's like it can't be defined and many other things. The difference between knowing it and not knowing it is all the difference you could ever stuff in your car and move from one place to another without killing yourself. It's all you need to know, because everyone else doesn't know it. All you need to know is that the passions of a person are the pretense of their passions, their loves, their hates. But if you don't know it, then you can't call it the pretense of passion, can you? No. And what do those people do? Hint, hint, what do they do? All right, they say things like, well, I feel so-and-so. And you would go, once you understand it, you might want to go, no, you don't. They say, yeah, I do. And then you'd realize, well, darn me. Yeah, they do. But they don't. Do they? No, but maybe their unconscious mind makes them that way. Ah. There's another purpose I must add before I leave, saying that, of me to bring back up that the passions of someone involved with this, someone who had a different order of intelligence, that their passions would be what they pretended their passions would be. But that doesn't mean that they would seem to be any different. But I'm saying it's the difference between understanding that your passions are what you're pretending them to be, whereas everyone else takes it as being themselves, and therefore must have explanations like, well, why in the world do you act like that? Well, you're right. Were it not for my unconscious mind, I wouldn't act that way. You're right, my temper. God, look at the number of jobs I've lost. You're right. They take it as being their real feeling. I cannot stand, I don't know. I guess I should have been born rich. Because I can't stand it to go to work for somebody and realize after a short period of time that by and large most of them are not as intelligent as I am, and then I have to put up with that kind of overbearing treatment from employers who probably themselves unconsciously recognize my superiority, and that's why they want to lay on me. But I need a job, so I shouldn't do that. It's not in my best interest, and of course I don't do it consciously, because who would? No one. You're right, no one. But what if there is something of a very specific... I said I was trying to give you a tool tonight. All of tonight is very practical. Let me give you that further hint. If you understood that even that which seems to be real, insofar as feeling, how can you jibe what people say they feel, and you, at the ordinary level of intelligence, how can you jibe that with them saying that until you point out some way that they feel, and then apparently affects their behavior, which is not profitable? And then they have to say, well, you're right, but it's not under my control, that part. The inference being, and if you ask them directly, that other parts are under their control, that which is beneficial. For instance, my friends, people I love. Of course, you can't push that too far. You say, well, how many times you been in love? Well, 10 or 15, maybe. How many wives or husbands you had? 7. What happened to your last wife? I heard she's dead. Well, yeah, I killed her. I didn't mean to. In other words, even those kinds of feeling that people would be inclined to take some personal credit for. That, all right, my unconscious mind does not make me feel love. Now, that's got to be an exception. Does not make me feel compassion for other people. But then, of course, you can't push that any further. You've got to ask, well, why is it that people you felt compassion for last week, you're now bad-mouthing? Or the woman that you were in love with 3 years ago, you put her in the hospital. Well, something must have happened to me in my unconscious mind, blah, blah. What I want you to see is that there is no exception at the ordinary level what people say that they feel cannot stand any sort of investigation. That is, why do you feel this way? From whence cometh this feeling? What is your conscious participation, if you insist, in this? How did you decide to feel this way? You can't do it. And I'm telling you why. Can you sense a practical use if you had this continuing intelligence, awareness of the fact that no one feels anything particularly comparable to what they say they feel, but that somebody that understands that is closer to actually feeling, because they understand, well, whatever I pretend to feel, I feel. I'm like everybody else, except I'm not. Because they're having what they call feelings. I can recognize it, I can feel it, but they think it's them. And then when it switches or something happens, then they say, well, boy, I feel bad about that. Well, all right. Press on then. Could you see how this might be connected? Once people are properly employed, entangled, engaged in city affairs, as we might say you're biologically inclined to do. I'm talking about in your specific way, yours and everybody's. You finally seem to be more or less a citizen of the city. More or less you are mature, seem to have a job if not a profession, seem to have a family if not a lover. You seem to now have gotten yourself in line. After that, it's almost as though, after that, it's almost as though life sort of leaves it up to you to find some reason for existing. I normally just refer to them as hobbies. But they then fall into little bitty, little teeny-weeny attempts for people to apparently find something to be, oh, what will we call it, all sort of passionate about. Think about that. Once you have accepted, which if you're middle class you have, forget what you may say here and there when you're in your cups. But once you have accepted that here I am, Jesus, I end up here I am with a wife and she's pregnant, and here I am with a little phony baloney diploma. Here I am with a little phony job from her father. Here I am in debt. Here I am with a mortgage. It's like, oh, all right. All right, after that, after you have taken your place in line, went, well, all right, and you're... Now, you're supposed to. Nothing's wrong yet. All of you were supposed to varying degrees, have gone through that. But after that, I want you to hear me. It's almost as though, after that, once life is assured of the fact that there you are, you're going to stay in line, you're not going to get out of line and really cause any havoc of any degree. It's almost as though then life sort of leaves it up to each individual, as best they can, to come up with some kind of phony baloney kind of excuse, sort of some reason to keep living. Now, I got to get up and go to work and all that crap, but when the work day's through, then it comes out in the kinds of things that, of course, I call them hobbies, and if we were dealing now with ordinary people, they might find some fault with some of the examples I could bring up, such as family. And it's not an attack, but you've got to be terminally dumb, terminally tied to old city intelligence not to realize that beyond, things can run in parallels now, beyond that kind of very basic genetic need for people to have children, for instance. Then people's children, many people in the city, it doesn't belie the fact that they are now biological parents and they're carrying on the good work of life, and enough people have got to have children to keep us all going. But then many people, it's not uncommon that their children become their hobby. Now surely you know that. It's not an attack. It's not pessimistic. It's not cynical. That's just very common. I don't know whether it's harder for men or women in the city to see it, because women are so tied to it. But if you can't see it, you got a bad area of dumbness. But there it is, and their child is their hobby. Not just the physical child, but the whole scenario, the whole ambiance. Buying diapers, talking to other mothers. It's as much a hobby as guys sitting around at a bar or a waffle shop in the morning discussing the scores from the Celtics game last night and the trades that may be coming up in the baseball season. And stuff that if you stood back and you had no particular interest, you could say, well, I guess they just have to do something to keep from going nuts. I mean, to me, worrying about a sports contest, Jesus. But then somebody else could say, for all this talk, reading books and trying to keep up with whether, how soon should you put your child into sports events? How soon can a child recognize good music from Drek? Somebody who is not wired up to have much of a familial... People who are not wired up particularly to be a mater or a pater can look upon this hobby of children and think, Jesus, I got nothing against kids, but boy, I could come up with a better hobby than that. It's as though life leaves to individuals for them to come up with just some kind of little old pretense to get up. But you remember I told you a long time ago, well, in your lifetime, that you should never, ever laugh, even to yourself, at somebody else's hobby. And that's the way I put it to you then, just hobby. You should not. And I don't mean you're offending the gods. I don't mean that Larry's going to get you. But it's a form of suicide. It's a form of you blocking out an energy flow in you that once you laugh at it and ridicule it and have that kind of negative response, then you won't see it in you. But to laugh at somebody else's hobby, I don't care what it looks like, that they collect broken eggshells, and they got the world's largest collection. Now, if we were ordinary people and I was playing psychologist, I could put it to you this way, which is not the point, you know, but I could say, look, don't laugh at that guy, because if it wasn't for that, he could be bonkers. That could be the only thing holding that guy together, which is not our problem, but I could put it to you that way, and you might go, oh, you're right. You know, that's nutty enough, but Jesus, I guess you're right. If you didn't have that, imagine. You should never laugh at anyone's hobby, because you are laughing, that is, you're blinding yourself to right at the heart of the flow of life through humans. Because it's almost as though life gives everybody, you know, I'll say it for 5th time, it's almost as though life sort of gives individuals, once they have accepted their fate, once they've accepted their position in the general scheme of things, it's almost as though life will sort of let them find some little reason, some little hobby. Maybe dream of being rich, buying all these little courses and these tapes on how to get rich. And they never actually try to do anything, and so you can say, well, God, how stupid. They go out and they spend these money going to courses and these seminars, and they actually never get into it. So that shows the hobby's doing it. Or people just sit around and talk about it and never do anything. All they do is read magazines and books on sailing, and they never buy a boat. You can think, well, Jesus, the hobby is thinking about it. It seems to, as that great other philosopher said, Mr. K.K., it seems to help them make it through the night. I refer you again to me asking, can you see any possible, very practical use of the fact of you understanding that you have such interest in life? And I'm not telling you to abandon them. I never have. I've told you, in fact, to support them, to pursue them if you have the least inclination. But to see the difference between the pretense of passion, which is on our level real passion, and the faux pretense of passion, which is what everybody else has and takes it seriously. Well, good. I believe in as much success as possible if it's, you know, complete failure is a form of success, that nobody sees a connection there. All right, I'll give you a damn hint. Some hobby you got, if you did begin to see this, and let's say that things worked out in a serendipitous manner perhaps, that your hobby of the things you collected, all these great books on sailing, and all these magazines you've held for years, and they're cross-indexed, and you keep up and you get brochures from all the things, and suddenly there it is, you drive up tonight going home and you see flames, and you look around the corner, and sure enough, it's your apartment's gone up and all the stuff's gone, and right then the muses of serendipity strike you with what I told you about hobbies, and you realize, hey, I ain't lost nothing. It was just a sham. And so therefore you don't feel bad. You don't feel anything except, what you feel then is now you think what I've been talking about all tonight. And any of you who really want to try and get to the bottom of things, could you try and carry this a little further than simply processed wood pulp into magazines and books? How about when it gets into even human nature, losing a loved one, having your love life fall apart, apparently other people not recognizing you for the splendid person that you potentially are? That you can lose things that apparently you had great passion for, hobbies, and lose them, and then realize what I've been talking about tonight. Then you can press right on to a new hobby if you need one. Or you might even, I suggest, realize that the particular hobby is sort of, maybe at least 3 or 4 miles this side of irrelevant. I'm going to wrap it up by taking you back to the beginning and say that all this is connected with me saying that you should absolutely, henceforth, from now on, forever, do not say, I feel. Just don't. Do not say it. Say, I think. And you don't have to try to stop saying that, and you can if you want to. Just not ever say any of it. It's fine with me. I don't care. But don't say, I feel. And you don't have to. I'm not saying that right now you are trying to totally second-guess yourself all the time so that the conversation doesn't even turn in that direction. All you got to do is catch that you're about to say, I feel. Even if you've already said it, just correct yourself. Say, I think. People are not going to notice. Only you, for your benefit, if you find yourself saying, well, I feel, I think that's not. Just do it. Try to get back and undo. If you catch yourself already in the sentence, you go back and say, I think. And the support under that, getting closer to the dialogue itself, as I said, to yourself, don't even think, I feel. Just don't think it. See, one partner can say it. One aspect of the dialogue can say something, but as long as the other partner, the other aspect, doesn't say it, you're all right. That's like the pre-echoes I've talked about. But you can see something go by that you apparently have some passion about. A bunch of young Republicans go by in a motorcade. Somebody's telling me the difference between a car full of young Republicans and a porcupine, but I won't go into it. But at any rate, it's this whole thing we've been through before that all of you should have your own working awareness of, be able to handle it. But here goes the carload of young Republicans, or whoever you want to attack, and I was trying to be fairly innocuous with it. And one aspect of your dialogue goes, fuck Republicans. As long as it does not take up both voices, then you're all right. You will have no real passion for it. That's like I described, that you can hear the noise behind the door, or you put on a record, good vinyl LP, and you can hear what's known as pre-echoes right before the opening bar of the song starts. With a lot of records, if not all of them, if you listen close enough, you can hear a pre-echo of what's about to come up because it bleeds over through the way the records are pressed. It's the same thing I point out. You're not responsible for what you think back at the old level. And that everybody is full of prejudice, hatred, you badmouth people. And of course that's a good reason for ordinary people to stay tied up with religion or psychology, is because they can continue to feed, how can I be so prejudiced against some other religion? How is it that I hate this other religion so much? That just proves how much I need my own religion to straighten myself out. Yeah. Okay for them, they got to have a hobby. But I've described all this in other ways for you. It's not a matter of you in some way being responsible. And I was just using this really a side trip right now at the end. They're looking at it from the viewpoint of the dialogue. Is whatever has already been put into the makeup of your thinking processes. Then when young Republicans go by, one aspect, if it takes notice, one aspect of your dialogue is going to say something about fuck Republicans. But as long as both aspects of the dialogue doesn't say it, you're safe. Those of you that's pursuing such activities, you either know what I mean or you'll know shortly. When I say you're safe, it renders it all moot. It is the five-dimensional counteraction. It is the soda with the salts. It will rectify what seems to be some ill-founded, unprofitable passion you have, because you don't actually have it. Unless you let the aspect that went ahead right up and spoke up before you actually knew what was going. You were just kind of jogging down the street, and suddenly the horns and the cars go by and the convertibles, and it says, hey, look at us, we're young Republicans. And one aspect of your dialogue goes, fuck Republicans. Now as long as the other one doesn't go, Fuck Republicans. Then you're all right. You are all right. But if you do the other one, you have agreed with it. You are it. The energy has taken its final grounding in that one instance, and you're the one who took it. Do not say, I feel. Unless you got to tell the doctor, I feel a pain here. Other than that, do not say, I feel. And of course, not just blindly, but everything I've mentioned tonight and anything else you can make of it. Why would I say that that is so useful? I'm even inferring it is, in fact, trying to make some semblance of your speech match reality. That is, to make you tell the truth, as they call it in the city, because you don't feel. How about the things you talk about? Not like you believe. Not like everyone else believes. Also, if anybody still thinks they're missing it, how about all the great popularity of everything from nicotine to caffeine to drugs to alcohol? You don't see any connection between that and paying to be entertained? You know, how's that entertaining? I told you already. Don't ask me now, how's that entertaining? People who never drank, how can they call it entertaining? I see people, they'll have 4 or 5 drinks. I see them on TV, or I see them coming out of the local bars, and people come staggering out and throwing up on their two-tone shoes. How in the world can they call it being entertained? I told you. Apparently there is more passion that you're exposed to than your ordinary life. To get old down-home idea that many of you have heard that's been down home enough, people in the South used to say, hey, let's get drunk and be somebody. Can you hear? Can you hear? In line of the paradigm I was trying to sketch out for you tonight, what they're saying? Let's get a few drinks, and it's the pretense. We feel like that, hey, we are somebody, and I become passionate about it. But as I am now, who cares? I don't even care who I am. If this is me, you know, who cares? I don't blame you for not being attracted to me, Mama. The hell, I'm not attracted to me. But wait a minute, stay right there. And the guy runs out right quick and gets a bat wing of Johnny, you know, and kills that and comes back and he goes, hey. Now apparently he has paid some price, but rather than being entertained out there and he's gone to see James Brown or Tina Turner or somebody, it's now as though internally he has moved part of his dialogue onto another stage, and this other part now is apparently more passionate. And all it took was a better part of a half pint. Or a couple of good joints now is all right. Would anybody also like to consider bringing out a tape? So why so it is not of any great popularity of people being by themselves? That hermetism is not a widespread hobby? Why most people, if they're going to think about being entertained, what would be the last thing that they'd think about? Well, I think I'll go home and sit by myself. I'm not saying that this is the point, but what if it could be otherwise? What if you could go home and find, or just go out in the alley and find that the most entertaining thing in the world that you know of is you? Which is not the right way to put it, the most correct way. That you have access. It's right to go out and pay to see James Brown if he ever gets out. But when it actually comes to it, is you know how to plug in. Oh well, bye. Well, wait a minute. Bye! Oh, goodbye. Oh, I hate to go, but the tape's running out. Oh, I'll see you again real soon.